But yeah, my name is Kristoffer. I'm from Brainbot, and I'm here to talk about the Trustlines Network, which is basically the original Ripple idea, but built on Ethereum. So I've divided the presentation up into two parts. The place where I want to start is kind of explaining the basic idea and the motivation behind the project, and remain kind of fairly high level, and then talk about how the original Ripple idea works and how it can be implemented on Ethereum. And then go on to the technical implementation, so you can see how we're building, kind of give a high-level overview of the architecture. And finally, the project status, where we currently are, what the next steps are, and yeah, stuff like that. I think we should have time for some questions as well. So, to understand the motivation of the project, I think it's helpful to understand kind of the killer application of blockchains, at least the way that we've defined them so far. And the thing that's completely unique about blockchains can be summarized into kind of three words: is permissionless decentralized payments. So the fact that when you are doing a payment using any kind of cryptocurrency, which is decentralized, you can make a payment from A to B, and the counterparty can be absolutely certain that if you pay the transaction fees that are on the network, such as gas or Satoshi or whatever, you will be sending that money from one party to another. There's no counterparty, there's no one in between who can actually prevent that transaction from happening. So this is quite amazing, because from a perspective of kind of other money types, there really is no other kind of digital money that works on a global scale that can do this. But it has some issues, and it mainly has some issues in the sense that the way that it's portrayed and the way that it actually works is not in sync. So if we first talk about the issuance, the idea of how it's supposed to be issued, at least if you look at, for example, Bitcoin, the idea is that anyone should be able to get access to the cryptocurrency by simply helping run the network. So how do you do that? Well, you turn on your computer like this one, and if you're the first one to discover a block, you're rewarded with Bitcoin. Same works for Ethereum. But there's a problem with that, which of course is you're never going to do this, because mining is like a winner-takes-it-all kind of business. You don't get a little bit for trying. You either get it or you don't. And you're competing with China and lots of other places who have way cheaper electricity than you. So this is not really something that kind of is feasible for regular people. No one can really run a full node and expect to get cryptocurrency unless they are in a specialized industry. So how does the average bear get access to cryptocurrency? Well, they go on an exchange and then they buy it with fiat first. And that's kind of where the problem is. That's the center of the problem, really. Because if you're buying something that you're going to use for payments, and you're using money, which is really, really good for payments already, like fiat money, kroners or euros, it's like super good money for payments. Why on earth would you buy something first with fiat and then use it for payments? It doesn't really make sense. So from there, if we're having the idea that we want to have a cryptocurrency which is ideal for payments, we have the problem that regular users are dependent on an exchange in order to get access to the cryptocurrency. So this means that if we wanted a cryptocurrency which was ideal for payments, we could create some kind of basic principles that it should have. So it should incentivize being spent. So when I have it, I should want to go and buy something with it, not speculate in its value. I shouldn't have to buy it on an exchange, because then why would I want to use it for payments in the first place? And it should be interoperable with the Ethereum ecosystem, because this way I can interact with it, or I could exchange it to my favorite dApps. And that would actually be okay, because as long as it remains within the ecosystem, exchanging one type of cryptocurrency to another that works within that function, that seems to be fair enough, at least to me. So the way we could do this is if we took money and issued it as IOUs, as basically all money is currently, and we instead issued it in a global payment network, which is built around individual trust relationships, and then we use these bilateral trust relationships to forward payments around. That is the basic Ripple idea. And the way it works is that we have Alice and Bob, who are good friends. They trust each other and know each other in the real world. They don't have to be in the same room or anything. They can be anywhere in the world, but they have physical, real trust with each other. So Alice issues Bob a credit line, and she doesn't really need any kind of app or anything to do this. People do this all the time. She basically says, Bob, I trust you, and at any point in time, you can spend up to $10 with me. So if we go out for a beer at a bar, I'll buy the round. We don't need to make an agreement for this. There's no signature involved. We just do this. And Bob does the same for Alice. And so this is defined, this is the kind of the definition of a trust line, right? Two credit lines issued bilaterally with a balance which indicates when money is spent, a capacity on each side which basically describes the limit of what the two people are willing to borrow each other with, or borrow each other. They could increase that, but that would require kind of a new agreement. So if Alice wants to spend some of her credit line that she has with Bob, she spends $5 of her $10. And so this gives Bob two things. It continues to give him the credit line that he already has, so still has $10, and he now also has $5 which he can spend. So he has been issued an IOU from Alice, and this IOU is backed by the trustworthiness of Alice. So this is money that is created in the real world. This is an IOU which was exchanged for something of value. Not really very significant, because we don't really need cryptocurrency for that. In fact, we don't really even need money for that. People have been doing that for thousands of years perfectly fine without any kind of money. The thing we need money for is when we want to pay a stranger. So if Alice tries to do the same trick with Bob, she has a problem because, or with Charlie, because Charlie does not trust Alice. So the IOU that Alice is issuing to Charlie is basically worthless because she can't back it with anything. And this is where we can go back to the network and say, if we have trust lines that are issued bilaterally between people who trust each other, we could look for a path of connecting trust lines that would allow Alice to back the IOU that she wants to issue with someone that Charlie trusts. And so she finds a path between Alice and Charlie through Bob, and Bob has, in a previous setting, issued a trust line bilaterally with Charlie, and also already had the one with Alice. So Bob has already said, up to $10 for both of these parties, I will let them spend this amount. And so if Alice wants to pay Charlie now, she can forward a payment to Bob, which creates an imbalance between Alice and Bob, and then Bob can forward the exact same amount to Charlie. And so this solves a couple of things. First of all, it lets Alice now back the IOU by someone that Charlie trusts, because Charlie is no longer dependent on the solvency of Alice. He's dependent on the solvency of Bob. For Bob, it's important that if he does this, it must not necessarily cost him anything. But this is okay for Bob because his net balance remains unchanged. So he still has $20 in a network he can spend. He just has $5 less in one trust line and $5 more in another. And for Charlie, this solves the fact that he now has money, an IOU that he can trust, and something that he can use in his network. So this way, we can use the different connections of trust lines in the network to forward payments in between people who trust each other. Still not really convenient, because at some point in time, as you might have discovered, well, this doesn't necessarily decrease. So if Alice was to keep sending payments to Charlie, at some point the trust line between Bob and Charlie would be maxed out, which is kind of inconvenient for Bob, because now he would either have to increase the trust line with Charlie for something that he was not necessarily involved in, or he would have to go back and ask Alice to settle so that he could settle with Charlie. Both scenarios are less than ideal. But this is kind of a cool feature of the setup, is that when we are connected in a payment network, we could mostly avoid settling. So if Dave and Bob, or if Dave wants to make a payment to Bob, and they are also connected in the same network, the payment that Dave makes cancels out the debt that Bob and Charlie had. So this is a social approach to money, where money circulates, it flows in many directions. Sometimes you are forwarding transfers, sometimes the transfers cancels out your debt. But in most scenarios, we can avoid settling, and we can use a setup and a algorithm to guide the system such that debt cancellation is incentivized over the actual fact of increasing debt. I'm going to go back to that and explain how that works later in the presentation. But for now, what we understood so far is that we do have an issue where we can reach a capacity of the trust lines, but as long as we have a social approach to money and we are connected in a payment network, we can both cancel debt and we can increase debt. So back and forth this way. And that's really the basic idea. that's kind of how it works. And the question is then, what on earth does that have to do with Ethereum? And what kind of problem does it solve? Well, if we made the original claim that we should be able to now issue money without the need of an exchange, we could say, well, here we simply download an app. This is actually also the UI. I took it from the devs before I came here and put it in. And so we can download an app from an app store like Google Play or whatever. And we can join by creating a trust line with a friend, someone who's connected to the network. And then we can start sending and spending. We can send money in the same network with this money that we can issue ourselves in the same payment network. So this is a very, very easy way to get access to cryptocurrency. It's a very, very easy way to get onboarded. At the same time, the cool thing about cryptocurrencies is also that there's all types of different cryptocurrencies. It's not just one that functions in a certain way. They have all kinds of different features. And in the same way, it would be amazing if we could have cryptocurrencies that, when they're issued as IOUs, function in the way that the person who issues them or who creates the network would want it to function. So we could say we could have a currency network, and it can be defined by pretty much anything that people find valuable. Euros, gold, beer, bitcoins, time, whatever. And then we can also define it by its user groups. So we could say we want a completely open one where anyone who is at the conference can issue a trust line with each other, and as long as they accept the denomination, they can connect and create many different networks, or they can connect to one whole network of the same currency type. We can also have some more specific customizations, such as rules on interest, or maybe we want to say we want to make sure that everyone's good for the amount, so we only want credit line limits of $10. That way, if someone defaults on it, it's not a huge loss. We could also have rules on interest. And the way that the architecture works here is you can see the credit lines that I mentioned in the initial slide, a balance, and then a currency network where all the trust lines are encompassed inside, and then the Trustlines Network, which is the protocol where you can create these different currency networks. So how does that enhance the onboarding of the Ethereum ecosystem? Well, let's say Alice now wants to buy some ETH, and Dave wants to sell some ETH, and they don't know or trust each other. What's neat about it is, well, of course, you have an Ethereum wallet. When you join the Trustlines Network, you are given that, and you need that because you also need to pay for gas so we can store transactions on chain. So at the same time, what Alice now does, if she wants to buy some ETH, either to pay for more transactions or just because she's interested in having some, she can look for someone who is offering ETH on a decentralized exchange. And this could, for example, be Dave, who says, I'm willing to sell ETH at a specific US dollar price in a currency network that I'm on. And if Alice likes that offer, she can take it. She can then discover a path between Alice and Dave in the currency network that they're in. And if there is a path with sufficient capacity, she can credit Dave in that currency network, and Dave will then send her ETH, which works as an atomic swap, basically meaning that either both of these statements execute or neither do. So what this solves is that we can remove the dependency that we now had on decentralized exchange or centralized exchanges, because we can use Trustline money, money that we can issue ourselves to get access to different types of cryptocurrency. We can also remove the requirement we have to have a bank account, which is another unfortunate part about exchanges, because that kind of removes the participation of a lot of people who doesn't have that in the first place. And since we know that we can use ETH or a lot of other ERC20 tokens to interact with dApps, the basic premise here is that you join by creating a trust line with a friend, and that should give you access to the entire Ethereum ecosystem. So how does that work? Well, the architecture is a mobile app. The mobile app signs transactions on chain. Private key is encrypted and stored locally. And the smart contracts, which I explained before, the currency networks, which I mentioned before, are smart contracts. Also the exchange, so the smart contract for exchanging between different currency networks or exchanging between cryptocurrencies and Trustline money. Both of these are smart contracts. And then finally, we have a federation of relay servers. They're basically helper services. And what they do is that they help find a path in the payment network. And so as I mentioned in the beginning, you could build an algorithm which incentivizes or follows a certain set of rules to make sure that the specific payment network that you're in has the same set, like acts the same way as, or base the same rules as how you describe it. And you can use these different pathfinding algorithms to help incentivize for this. So let's first look at the DEX contract. So the challenge here is connecting currency networks. Sometimes we cannot directly swap between different currency networks, and sometimes we need ETH to close a gap in an existing currency network. So let's look at an example where this could happen. Let's say if Alice wants to pay Dave in a US dollar network, but she is only in the euro network. So what she could use ETH for here is to bridge the gap between these two currency networks. So Alice could find someone in the currency network, euro currency network, who's willing to sell ETH in exchange for euro credit in that network. And if she can also find someone in the US dollar currency network who is willing to buy ETH in exchange for US dollar currency credit, she can then swap these two atomically and credit Dave in the currency network that he's in, which also makes her spend money in the same in the euro network that she was in herself. Now, why would we need a relay server to help find different paths? Well, we need to make a payment. The payments we need to have a valid path. We could do it on the mobile phone, but it's not really efficient because there's quite limited memory. And we could also do it on-chain, but this is super expensive, which is not really what you want to do. So relay servers, we can use them to help find these different paths, and they're basically the gateways to the blockchain for this. So the different algorithms that you can build, the overall goal is to incentivize a balanced network and provide transfer capacity. And we can do this by introducing different fees. So for example, an imbalance fee, whenever an imbalance is created, so when Alice was paying, was forwarding a payment, and this creates a further imbalance, well, that very payment would have a larger fee than one which reduces the imbalance. Also, finding a capacity. So if I forward a payment for someone, if someone is using my trust lines to forward a payment, I collect a small fee because I'm helping the network out for this. We can also have fees on interest. Then we have mandatory fees. The relay servers are paid in gas or in ETH as micropayments. And of course, because we store transactions on-chain, we need to pay gas for this. So I'm going to try to wrap this up quickly because I think we're short on time. But basically what I want to explain with the pathfinding is to illustrate how that works. This is a really bad path, right? Because Dave and Earl already have an imbalance, and this payment would create a larger imbalance. The same goes for Earl and Bob. But down here, we don't have an imbalance already, so this is okay. And this is even better because here we actually had an imbalance, so we can reduce an imbalance in the network by making a payment. So this is the one. This path would be cheaper, and so the algorithm would tell Dave to use this path instead of the other one. So what's the current status? It's a work in progress still. And the screenshots that I showed you here are from the mobile app, which is going out on live alpha soon, TM. If you have a chance to see us at EdCon, I really urge you to do that. I think we will have something really cool to present there. For now, I don't want to spoil too much. I just want to say that if you're curious to know about how any of this works, check out our GitHub repository. You can find a lot of the code there and check it for yourself. If that's not your thing, then check out our Telegram group. We created a new social channel. We used to have Slack, but now we moved to Telegram. You're welcome to join us there and ask any questions that you like. If you want to read our white paper, we have one of those as well. That's located down here. So yeah, this is we're building an open protocol for decentralized IOU-based currency networks. And this enables payments based on a network of individual trust relationships. This is a really old but powerful idea, which can increase the adoption of cryptocurrencies. Thanks.